Come on out. Thanks very much, everyone. All right. The insurance panel is not going to be boring.
People love insurance. They love it. Oh, you're so fortunate.
Really fun.
Let me start with all the way on my left, your right, with Thom Albrecht with some introductions. Thom Albrecht is the Chief Revenue Officer of Reliance Partners Insurance. Tom's had an illustrious career with about 3 decades of equity research experience. We missed each other by just a few years at A.G. Edwards, which was actually my first financial experience as an intern in college. But Tom was one of the top Wall Street analysts covering the transportation industry for a long time. We were competitors, clients together. We've known each other for quite some time. We were all really rooting for him at Celadon when he gave a heroic attempt, but that situation was probably too far gone before you got there.
Lesson there is you're not going to overcome the Department of Justice.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to have a little retrospective there. But in addition to his role as Chief Revenue Officer at Reliance, Tom's also a director at Arc Best Corp, and he's actually presented at this seminar several times already. So welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
And to Tom's right is Tony Johnson, president of Marvin Johnson Associates, a local insurance agent in town. Tony's been in the family business here in Columbus for 25 years, is that right?
That's correct.
But I think he's been in the family business for basically his entire life.
Right.
And in addition to knowing the insurance side of the industry inside and out, he has a great feel for the pulse of the market, so we'll look for his expertise on what's happening with fleets. And you probably know Matthew Leffler here to my left, the Armchair Attorney, also a lifer in the industry, also
Red corduroy.
Great fashion sense. And as his handle suggests, he is a legal expert. In addition to that, he is also an adjunct professor in supply chain at Michigan State. So with that out of the way, maybe I'll start with a softball for Tom. How likely would you have said it 40 years ago that you'd end up with 3 of the best freight and Class 8 analysts and economists in the entire country, all coming from Alton, Illinois? And yes, I'm talking about Kenny and Ken as well.
Well, the town is due to have some sort of good thing happen to it after, losing steel mills and glass plants. But no, it turns out when I first came to this event 20 years ago, I was wearing a golf shirt from my hometown, and Kenny recognized it. And it turns out the public course I played in the 80s, he used to be the guy I'd pay the money to. And then Ken and my mom, who's getting ready to turn 88 tomorrow, they went to high school together. So there's a story for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. You guys want to give just like a quick overview of your companies?
Marvin Johnson Associates, independent truck insurance agency. It took me forever to get here today. My office is right across the street, right there. 3rd generation. Marvin is my grandfather. My father is the CEO, Steve Johnson. Been president for, 3+ years. I have eat, sleep, breathe trucking insurance. Anything that has to do with it. Has been many interesting family affairs, holidays, birthdays, all kinds of times growing up where I can remember my uncles, my father now, and then the 3rd, and I have a 4th generation that's coming in behind me. Unfortunately, none of us cannot talk about business when we get together as a family. So if there's any family operations out there, I get it. There you go.
Well, my background is I've been practicing law since 2010. I'm a transportation attorney. I have my own law firm called Armchair Attorney. I'm a podcaster. I'm a legal consultant. I'm a consultant with other things. I serve on the board of a company called Velocity. They install telematic devices and IoT things across the North America and in Europe, like cameras, sensors, things for automation. My grandpa was an owner-operator. He hauled grain in central Illinois. My father's first job out of college was roadway in 1976. He started his own company in 91 called Outsourced Fleet Services. Our first customer was Roadway Package Systems. Anyone remember RPS?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That company today, FedEx Ground. Yeah. FedEx Ground. So I love this business. I am obsessed with transportation. So I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we'll have more trivia about the supply chain. Work our way through tonight.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So before we get into a lot of the insurance issues, I actually want to talk about some legal issues, some driver issues, that kind of stuff to sort of set the stage.
Tim, can I So just so folks know who Reliance is,
absolutely.
we are also an insurance agency similar to the Marvin Johnson. It was founded in 2009. We work with about 10,000 motor carriers and about 700 freight brokers. On the motor carrier side, over 90% of our customers have 100 or fewer trucks. Whereas on the freight brokerage side, we work with almost a majority of the giants, 54 of the top 100, 5 of the 10 largest. But we also work with a lot of small and mid-sized freight brokers as well. So I did want to share that. And of course, just so the audience knows, neither Marvin Johnson nor Reliance, we don't underwrite. We work with a series of underwriters. We've got about what's called 200 appointments, of which probably 80% of our premiums are from about 30 underwriters. And Great West is our largest underwriter at about 12 to 13% of our premiums.
Concur. Good.
Yep.
Well said.
Thanks. All right. We will get back to the underwriters and what's going on with them in a little while. There's just so much going on with the regulatory environment, with the legal environment. I want to start with non-domiciled CDLs. The rule just hit the Federal Register on the 13th, just last Friday. I believe it becomes effective on March 16th. Can we start there, just kind of talking about, Matthew, I think you have interesting perspective on the rulemaking process. Maybe we'll start there and just go around the horn for all of your views on what effects is this going to have?
Yeah, how many of you have been following the non-domiciled CDL rule? Have any of you been following this thing? Okay, this is a really interesting regulatory change we've seen happen. So initially, the FMCSA identified non-domiciled CDL holders as very dangerous on the open roads. And so they made an interim final rule. They circumvented the normal process. What the normal process is, you propose a rule, you get a bunch of comments, you make a final rule, and then you either implement it or you get sued. But they said, this is such an emergency, we have to do it now. We have to do it now. And that interim final rule got stopped. It was stopped at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. It was done. But during that process, these comments were still being made. And ultimately, the FMCSA has put out a final rule on non-domiciled CDLs. Initially, they identified about 206,000 people who had non-domiciled CDL, which is what it really boils down to is people who do not live in that state getting a CDL. That was the initial ruling around non-domiciled. These days, we talk about as people who are in this country illegally in some cases, who have CDLs they got issued from a state they don't live. And so the plan for the FMCSA is over the next 2 to 5 years is that this grouping of non-domiciled CDL holders are going to have their licenses downgraded. The interim final rule and the final rule are almost identical. There are really no carve-outs other than agricultural types of employment status. You have to prove your status every single year. And what we see happening is the FMCSA far more energetic than we have ever seen them. They are moving at a pace that we have never seen in the industry. So the non-domiciled CDL rule, as you correctly mentioned, is like it's happened. It's going to be implemented soon. I guarantee you it'll be sued. They will be sued immediately. There's 8,000 comments that the FMCSA received on this, which is insane in terms of how many comments it is. But we are going to watch this thing unfold in real time. And that's what makes supply chain and law so interesting. You can't opt out of either one of them. You have to follow it and see what's going on. And you see companies like Highway and others now not even letting those companies that have non-domiciled CDLs on their platforms at all. So we are already seeing some capacity exit the market, though not nearly at the scale we need to see a really big recovery.
What proportion of those 200,000 or so do you think are going to exit, and over what time period? Is it about 2 years on the CDL renewal?
So the initial interim final rule said it was 2 years to get rid of the 200,000 people. And they assumed about 6,000 would stay. The new rule says it'll take maybe 5 years. I think it's way faster. Yeah. I think you're going to see that capacity exit and get downgraded very quickly. What the FMCSA is doing on top of the non-domiciled is truck driving schools, and they're saying, we're just going to withhold money. We'll withhold money from your state unless you downgrade these people. And they're using that money as a coercive measure to get people to comply. And I think I'd love to get Tom's perspective on this too, is are insurers willing to cover non-domiciled? Because this is the next pathway.
Tom?
Well, I would say in general, the underwriters have been a little bit slow to understand the issues. They're asking our agents, do you have any articles you can share? I mean, they're still kind of stuck in their traditional cocoon of how they assess risk. And the value of the equipment and things like that. I do think probably every quarter it will become a little bit more of a factor, so that maybe by mid-2027 it will be a part of most underwriting processes, but surprisingly it's not been. Now, I'm not a producer in the manner that this gentleman is here, so he may have a little bit more to share. I would say what we've heard is basically folks that want to drive are going to drive regardless. Doesn't matter if they have a valid CDL or not, and we'll get into some of that and maybe the impact on insurance. And then we had a portion that just got scared initially. So our safety team reports to me, and back in, I think it was in November, Daniel received a call from a 180 truck outfit in California. It was not a customer, it was a prospect. I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday call. By the time he got out there the next Wednesday, they'd lost 90 drivers. And the owner told him that the drivers were scared to death. So they were going back to their homelands. And we've heard other stories, actual stories, where drivers just went poof like that, or the owner fired them. So there's the fear factor, which a lot of folks are just afraid of being caught. They're doing something else. Then there's others, they don't care. They know that they can drive and just cheat, basically.
I don't want to pick on my friends at the ATA, but for over a decade, they've been telling the story that all of you have heard, that there's a driver shortage. And when you have a driver shortage, that's the narrative you get told. You think, let's lower the barriers to enter. Let's make it easier to get a CDL. Let's make it easier for you to operate a commercial vehicle. And then you see what results from that. And that's catastrophic accidents. The FMCSA, in their final rule, identified, I think it was 30 or maybe 50 deaths that were caused in the last year from non-domiciled CDLs who were not qualified to operate a vehicle in our country. And it's astonishing that it took so long to get here, but now you see the regulatory agencies and the associations pushing for more rigid enforcement, which I think is encouraging.
Well, so there's 2 or 3 things at work. So the non-domiciled CDL originally was proposed in 2013, and as you said, it was so someone in Ohio could get a CDL in Georgia or wherever. And gradually it became more international drivers, and then of course we had the border that was flooded in recent years. At the same time, if we go back to 2016, the ATA, I actually have a copy of the press release, said they're pushing for self-certification of CDLs, of CDL schools and instructors. But it wasn't going to take effect until February of 2020. So there was about a 3.5-year gap. Well, guess what? February 2020 is a month before COVID. Change of administration a year later. There was also some relaxation of other CDL standards. It was the perfect storm for how this industry got messed up. And the numbers that I show, and I know it's supposed to be about insurance, but as much as 15%, and I don't think less than 10% of the industry today operates either to steal cargo or to run non-compliantly. And I can go into those numbers if you ask me over a cocktail tonight. But I'm not just making numbers up. I can put numbers behind that. And so it's just so many things that came together to put this industry in a very fragile state. And as it relates to insurance, we've seen a huge uptick in deaths, a lot of times because these folks are not trained properly with, like the whole CDL thing. 39,554 on November 30th. We're down to about 30,000, but in 2019, there were only 6,000. That whole self-certification, that would be like me self-certifying that I'm a master chef, or Matthew, you self-certifying that you're a scratch golfer.
I'm very bad at golf.
Yes,
very bad.
Exactly. You just can't self-certify, and it's almost like the S from FMCSA went away for like 15 years. There was no emphasis on safety. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but to Matthew's point, there's a rejuvenation of what their mission is supposed to be about.
Yeah, let's stay on this self-certification theme and talk about log toggling. So ELDs have apparently made keeping 2 dual logs easier than ever. Matthew?
Yeah, so have you also been following the ELD issues? All right, thank you.
sure
I got
most
some
people
hands
have,
back there.
yes.
So these are the things your customers care about. These are the things your customers have to deal with. They have to deal with regulations, and ultimately, you understanding them will help you better serve your customers. But the ELD mandate came out 16, 17, there was litigation, but ultimately the goal was we're going to get away from paper logs. You're going to have a device in your vehicle. It's a government-mandated subscription service. What ends up happening in that context is it says, if you want to sell this device to truck drivers in America, you have to fill out this form. And it's called self-certification. You say, I meet all of these things, let me sell the device. If you look at the numbers today, there's 1,000 or so ELDs that are self-certified in our country. There are 400 that have been revoked in the past, since the mandate came into effect. You're talking maybe 10 years, and you see 4 to 8 devices revoked every single month. Now, our current administrator of the FMCSA, Derek Bars, says that's unacceptable. And everyone in this room should also say that's unacceptable. Because ultimately, if you want your stuff to get delivered safely, on time, and undamaged, you have to have technology that works. And so what's happened with ELDs right now is that we've seen people spoofing them. People can hack into them and change things or reset them because the government doesn't care. They don't validate these things. They're reactionary. And so what we're going to see this year coming up is a more rigorous enforcement and likely moving away from self-certification. Because you cannot trust companies who have a desire to drive revenue and not focus on safety. And FMCSA now understands that this is an issue they ought to tackle, and that is one of Derek Barr's really key things in 2026 is to tackle this ELD mandate and to get away from self-certification.
Well, and here's the crux. By being able to falsify ELDs, and a lot of them are being controlled from Armenia, Serbia, Croatia, and other places, and they can not only suddenly, the driver's only got 30 minutes of drive time left, and they just change it, and now he's got 6 more hours left. Well, you'll take away the economic incentive to cheat. So I heard I think it was on the truck dealer panel, driving 105,000 miles a year. Well, these crooks are driving 160, 170,000 miles a year on solo trucks. So fix the ELD, all of a sudden the economics change. Now, there's a lot of other things that need to be fixed as well. So, for example, on whether it's ELP or non-domiciled, if someone gets written up there, especially on ELP, well, I'm all for immigration, but that driver's CDL needs to be suspended. Right now, what'll happen is he's put out of service, but there's no accountability. He may be driving again tomorrow. Somebody comes from his firm, picks up the equipment. The equipment also needs to be impounded. And so I think there's efforts underway to help the FMCSA understand what are the next couple of practical steps. They'll identify some of the big picture changes, and then the industry finally has found an ear to share, well, here's really how you can help enforce that. But all of this impacts insurance ultimately.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. It all trickles down. Fraud, not being trained correctly. And then one of the gentlemen earlier mentioned something about he wished he could see less nuclear verdicts.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? You won't.
Guess where a lot of this is coming from when they find out that the guy's been driving for 20 hours straight. And he or she runs over somebody or causes an accident. Insurance company just says, okay, how much?
Yeah.
Let me tell you how bad it is. And there's a couple folks here. I was on a podcast with Jeff Kaufman several months ago. So, they're not cheating their truck counts, telling the underwriters that they've got 15 trucks when they've got 18. The scale is much bigger than that. So one of our folks, one of our insureds was hit by another motor carrier. The claims process started. It looked like they had one truck. This fleet had 1,000 trucks, and over 600 of the drivers did not even have a CDL. And there was another instance where the carrier got their authority. They're out of Springfield, Illinois, and I won't mention their name. They got their authority last May, listing one truck, but there's 600 trucks there, and between May and November of last year, they had 417 inspections. These folks are they're not cheating slightly. They are criminals in the worst way. There's another situation in Pennsylvania where, just so the audience is clear, when you have a DOT number, that means you're also going to have assets. MC number, of course, asset-based carry has an MC number too, but the brokers have MC numbers only. And so this guy out of Armenia had 9 DOT numbers, and that gave him more authority to get onto load boards. He got into some broker platforms and also some shipper load boards. A lot of people don't realize shippers have their own load boards that go out every day as well. Guess what? He didn't own a single truck. And so he tricked the system from the other way. We hear about all this MC fraud. This was DOT fraud. And right now, this is a case moving through Pennsylvania. But the problem is they can't extradite the guy from Armenia. And that a lot of what goes on is they pick these jurisdictions where they're never going to get extradited back here.
Well, that's a good segue to COCA.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that, combating organized retail crime.
All right.
And I do want to come back to Thom and just follow up on that. What does FMCSA have to do to help the insurance industry?
Let's come back to that.
Yeah, but yes, let's do.
How many? I'm going to another raise of hands. How many of you have heard about the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act? How many of you? Okay, I got a couple hands. Please, 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 when you get done with this, that's my one takeaway. I might have a couple takeaways. That's a really important takeaway.
That's a big one.
COCA is an act in Congress. It's got over 160 sponsors. This is Democrats and Republicans. COCA is about the name Combating Organized Retail Crime. Here's the reality. What we see in cargo theft and fraud, and what your clients and your customers are experiencing every single day, is not opportunistic theft. Maybe it happens opportunistically. Maybe it does. But realistically, there are organized criminal cartels, and the numbers vary. Some people say it's $18 million a day. Some people say, like TIA, say it's $35 billion a year that is stolen from all of you and from your customers and from me and from you, from everybody. And what happens, as Thom alluded to, this is international criminal conspiracies. There's nothing that Indianapolis or Chicago can do against any of those people. And what ends up happening is there's so many criminal participants, there's no organization to help stop it. So what COCA is designed to do is create a centralized group within the Department of Homeland Security to deal with this issue, to coordinate state, federal, local law enforcement, the industry, and the regulators to hopefully find a way to stop this. Because you might love Highway or RMIS or Truck Stop or whoever else. No private industry, no individual player can stop an organized criminal cartel. They cannot do that. And so this act has gotten through one part of the congressional journey. There's a companion bill in the Senate, but this is without a doubt the most important bill that every one of you should care about. Your associations care about it, your customers care about it, and if it gets passed, there will finally be some way to attempt to stop what's happening with cargo theft and fraud in the transportation industry.
I would say those numbers are too low. If it's 18 million a day, it's probably north of 50. Because a lot of motor carriers, they don't want to report it because they don't want to incur claims.
True.
And just talking to, the gentleman left Travelers recently that we both know, he's a different underwriter, and he estimates that less than 10% of cargo, stolen cargo is actually reported. So you could throw 10 times 18 million maybe. Now, he doesn't know exactly, but that's the magnitude of the problem.
That's how the cartels operate. They find a place where they can sneak in and defraud you. And they take as much as they can, as quick as they can. And ever since deregulation and how he's fragmented this industry, there's a whole bunch of ways to get after it. We'll just talk about FMCSA just briefly. It's an organization with about $1 billion of what it gets allocated every year. Half of that is allocated towards giving grants to states on infrastructure projects. They have about 1,100 employees and maybe 400 investigators. There are over 550,000 motor carriers, 25,000 brokers, 6,000 interstate bus companies, millions of drivers, thousands and thousands of truck driving schools. They don't have the resources to force anything. They're doing the best they can with incredibly limited resources. So if you like to call your congresspeople, and you ought to do that from time to time, this bill is bipartisan in an environment where Nothing is bipartisan, but this is. That's amazing. That's amazing. Transportation brings the country together. It always has. It always will.
Well, what a better segue into insurance.
Let's do it.
Here, let me one last thing.
Yeah.
So I'm a carrier. My trailer disappears. I don't even know it's been stolen for 2 days. And I call my local law enforcement. I love police. We all do. Local law enforcement, support them 100%. They have a hard job. But when I say, hey, my trailer's been stolen, okay, we'll take the information. We'll put out an APB. We'll look for it. Yeah, if we find it, we'll let you know. That's extremely disconcerting if I have a $150,000 load of scrap steel, whatever you want to put on the back of that trailer. Use your imagination. It's never seen again. If it happens again, to your point, what am I going to do? I'm not even going to waste my time because I know it's already gone.
Yep.
So this is a big deal. We do have bipartisan support. This is something we should all be pushing forward to where we actually can have a measure of to say, hey, I've got something I can do now that I can get support, that I can get help, that this can be stopped.
Well, and so a question then is, why has this become so prominent, say, since COVID? Well, with COVID, we learned we could work from home, and then the thieves learned that they could steal from home. And it became as simple as that. And pardon me just a second here. I think this slipped a little.
I think one answer to your question is that crypto made it a lot easier to launder.
Well, what I was going to say is, so there's been the emergence of online marketplaces. I was at an event with a large public carrier last year. Amazon was there, and they talked about how many stolen items from their own warehouses are showing up on their own marketplace, being resold, Facebook Marketplace. And then the thieves have figured out there's such a premium internationally, and this market was very nascent 10 years ago, for tequila, for
Energy drinks. Shoes.
Whiskey, Nike tennis shoes, or now some of the other brands that have disrupted Nike. And so, for example, that tequila might go for 500 or 600% face value on an international market in certain parts of the world. It used to be when thieves would just sell the stuff domestically, something like that might go for 60 cents on the dollar domestically. And then, toilet paper or paper towels would only go for 10 or 15 cents on the dollar. Bottled water would go for 25 or 30 cents on the dollar. These international markets are paying either close to face value, or especially in the case of sports drinks and liquor, many times face value. It's astonishing. So that has also brought in more thieves, which is why, back to insurance, and Tony can speak to this better, cargo insurance used to be about the easiest thing to renew. Now you're fighting your performance there, and you're starting to see a hard market there in many cases around cargo.
Yeah, your cargo, for your customers, your cargo policy is probably the one thing that's going to differentiate itself between any other company. Liability is liability, physical damage is physical damage. Cargo is where you find the ifs, buts, candies, and nuts. That's where you got to pay attention. And it's getting harder and harder. We are seeing more and more, and I don't mean to jump, we're seeing more claims on the broker side than we ever have on the carrier side. And I'm talking specifically about theft of cargo. Okay, how does it relate to insurance? Who do you think's paying the bill? Who's paying the tab? Insurance companies. Who's ultimately paying for it? You, me, us. Yeah. We all are. That's the problem. And it is getting harder and harder. 2001 was my first day of selling truck insurance, and the average limit that I would see was even then it was like 75 grand, 100,000 for a cargo policy. Now it's 250, $500,000. And that's just to sleep at night. Everything has gone up, cost has gone up, theft has gone up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good times.
And it seems we're still pretty underinsured as
I used to have hair.
Absolutely.
I was like 30 pounds lighter. The insurance is awesome. My office is right over there. If anybody wants a job, let's go.
Let's talk about the minimum liability on the trucks, though. Not the cargo going up is very interesting, but like the $750,000 minimum liability, we all know is too low, right? I guess the question is, what can be done about that? Can it be changed? What would that mean? Yeah.
I have strong opinions on that. I got strong opinions on that.
I would like to hear.
All right, I'll just give you guys some history real quickly. When was the number $750,000 set in our industry? It was.
I have
Yeah,
80s.
it's in the 80s. It's in the 80s. Now that number was never adjusted to inflation.
Correct.
If you adjusted that number to
Like the
inflation,
diesel tax.
Where we at?
the number would be closer to $3 to $4 million for a policy. Now, when I talk about the limited barriers to enter this business, part of that is the insurance. I'm a lawyer, right? I love the law. If you get into a catastrophic accident and that person goes to the hospital, that's 2 weeks in the hospital, that policy's done. The insurer is tendering the policy, they'll defend you, but you're bankrupt, you're gone. That's the business. Now, there are big motor carriers, we'll probably talk about Werner, we'll talk about the manufacturers that actually have real insurance that can cover these things. But that number of $750,000 has been attempted to be raised multiple times. The last time they tried to raise the minimum insurance for over-the-road freight, general freight, was an act called the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act. 2 groups opposed it, the American Trucking Associations and OIDA. If you can get those 2 to agree, nothing is happening. So we look at these things like ELP or non-domiciled CDL as ways to limit the capacity in the business, get more higher rates for your customers because there's less drivers. Those things are small, infinitesimal to what you could do of raising that minimum insurance to even $2 million, or God forbid, $3 million. But your customer's customer is fixing this. The shippers are increasingly saying, you can't haul for me if you just have the minimum. I need to see more. And so some motor carriers are getting more insurance, but $750 is absurd. It is underinsured, no doubt about it. But we as an industry have a lot of interest.
Assuming everybody knows that's the minimum federal filing for a for-hire carrier.
Yes,
right?
for
Just so we're all
for-hire.
on the same page.
Now, I think the audience knows it's really $1 million. I mean, I can't remember anybody at Reliance, but it's legally it is $750. So then the question is, will it be raised? I kind of feel like there's a shot that it will be raised, and Tony, I want to get your thoughts on this. It's not as simple as, let's just say it ought to be $5 million or $3 million, and we're talking auto liability here. Cargo's $100,000, but as you've alluded to, a lot of times motor carriers are moving towards $250 depending on their customer base. But you go back and so first of all, you have to have what's called paper. There has to be real money that an underwriter has to be able to issue insurance. So you could say $5 million tomorrow, the industry isn't going to have enough capacity to underwrite that. Or $3 million. And so I'm going to defer to your technical knowledge of it. But,
here we go.
I mean, but just explain to them how that works. I mean, even if we said like $1.5 million for up to 25 trucks, $2 million up to 50 or 70 trucks. What's got to happen with the underwriters and paper?
But they got to have reinsurance capacity to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be stair-stepped at a slow pace. They can't just flip a switch. It's not going to happen. Not to mention the consumer. What do you think is going to happen? It's all going to get passed down again. I really thought it would happen at a state level.
So New Jersey has done that. Some states have tried. That's true.
We were kind of talking earlier that maybe, okay, New Jersey's first one through the wall. Who's gonna go next? Who's gonna go next? And
the trucking lobbyists are some of the most powerful in the world. I mean, ultimately, if you want the roads to be safer, you have to pay more for things you want. And most Americans do not want to pay more for things. We're happy with the supply chain that we currently have. This is the supply chain we deserve. Whether we love it or hate it, that's what we get because that's the choices that we've made.
If we could, I don't want to get off on a
I
tangent.
love insurance.
I don't want to get off on a tangent. Does anybody know? Okay, so our insurance is regulated by the federal government, right? Okay, politics are all over it. Let's really water it down. Your personal auto is regulated by your state. What politician is going to run on, I'm here to raise the minimum state limits for everybody? So we can all feel good that the minimum needs to be raised so everybody can feel good. In case something happens, there's enough money. Do you think that person's going to win? Hell no.
I'd vote for him.
I probably would too, because it is the right thing to do.
But many of you are business owners. Like, you have a service truck. That service truck gets rear-ended or you hit somebody. You're facing the same liabilities trucking companies do.
Yeah.
Most of you probably carry more than $1 million of liability. But this is the reality we live in. The vast majority of motor carriers, 91 or 92%, have less than 10 trucks. And they carry inadequate insurance. And the national out-of-service rate, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Sure.
The national out-of-service rate for commercial vehicles, the trucks and trailers on the road right now, is 22%. 22% of all commercial vehicles on the road right now hauling all of your stuff are unsafe at any speed. Now, if I was a grocery store and I had 5 gallons of milk and I said, I have 5 gallons of milk, one of them is unsafe. You'd say, Matt, you seem like a nice guy. I don't want to buy any of your milk. And I'd say, that's okay, but you don't get a choice. That is what we see every day.
Yeah, you're right.
And that's why the plaintiff attorneys are looking at you and your customers and going, oh, they have no idea what they're doing.
Blood in the water.
I can make $100 million off of you. That's compelling. And that's the part of the insurance that gets me really excited.
The nuclear verdicts.
Absolutely.
We'll get to nuclear verdicts. Just a sec. But I want to bring it back to the freight cycle a little bit and ask about insurance providers. It seems like there's been sort of a lot of competition among the insurance providers that you guys work with. Can you talk about what's going on there and
Well,
how that's maybe affected the cycle?
So, there's a couple Wall Street analysts here, old friends of mine. That world is different. They've been in a hard market. Hard means just the rates of premiums are increasing generally more than the overall inflation rate. They seem to have been in a hard market for probably 15 of the last 17 years, some crazy number. But what a lot of people don't realize is from about mid-2020, there were 1 or 2 that were set up a year before that, until probably late 23, it was a bull market for small motor carriers to buy insurance. We had an incredible amount of new capacity come in, so there was paper, reinsurance behind it, and they had a mandate to grow, and some of them had some good ideas requiring forward-looking cameras and hair follicle testing. The problem is, it depends on the underwriter, but one didn't really build out much of an infrastructure for billing and collections. The other one was somewhat irresponsible on how they were underwriting. They're gone now. But they put pressure on the overall market, and there were a couple of others that have survived by the hair on their chinny chin. They've had to raise their prices a lot because the losses overwhelmed them. But if you were a carrier with 1 to 10 trucks, 1 to 5, maybe up to 20, in a couple cases you might have even been able to get up to 50 trucks with one of these new cutting edge underwriters. And so, a small motor carrier with, let's say, 8 trucks, his insurance might have been $13,000 a year for auto liability per truck. These next-gen underwriters were coming in at $10,500, $11,000. Or if you were a good credit at 11, you were getting $7,800. It was crazy. And that added to the capacity growth on top of all these other things that we've explained. Sure. The good news is those folks are gone. It's been a hard market for small carriers probably since the fourth quarter of 23. Your perspective?
Yeah. No, that's correct. We've been fighting rates. I was not everybody hated me last year, hated me, because I have really, really good carriers that do all the right things, and said, here's your increase. Why? Nobody's making money, and no owner wants to hear that. But that's the truth.
One good thing that came out of that is and Tony and I talked about this last night, a lot of the resistance that small fleets used to have about forward-looking cameras has kind of been broken down. Even though there were just a handful of underwriters that did that, they grew so fast, the rates were appealing. And I mean, if you did something nationally with a federal regulation, I don't think that would be disagreed upon the way it would have 6 or 7 years ago.
No.
So take that to your next FMCSA luncheon there.
I can do that.
We've got drivers that won't get in the trucks unless they know the camera's working.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which is good. It's a good thing. It protects you, protects me, protects the driver.
All All right, one more legal issue before we get to nuclear verdicts. Broker liability. So this is actually going before the Supreme Court just in a couple weeks, I think March 4th.
Yeah.
And we do have, yes,
We got CH in
a
the
friend
house.
from C.H. Robinson who's going to be.
How many of you are following this case, the Montgomery case? We got some hands, Yeah. All right, so we had a question on one of the last panels about drop trailer pools, right? Drop trailer pools. That's partially driven by brokers, right? So if you go back 20 years, brokers moved 6% of freight in the United States. Today, brokers move 25% of freight. It's ostensibly a $300 billion a year industry moving freight through a third party. And this question before the Supreme Court of the United States is a case called Montgomery v. Carbide. And what it's about is C.H. Robinson hired a motor carrier. Motor carrier had a terrible accident, and that person who got injured sued the motor carrier. You always sue the motor carrier. They sued the driver. You always sue the driver. And they sued the broker. You always sue the broker. The reality, though, is that there's a law called F4A, and what that law says is that brokers are in charge of price, route, service. They don't guarantee the performance of the trucking company. And this has gone to multiple federal circuits across the United States, and they've come up with different answers. In some circuits, the broker can be liable. In some circuits, the broker cannot be liable. What we are seeing is this case is now going before the Supreme Court. March 4th is the actual hearing date, the oral argument in this case. This case, besides the IEPA case, is probably the most important case in transportation right now as it relates to brokers. And many of your smaller motor carriers, they're not working directly with shippers. Many of your small motor carriers work with brokers. They work with intermediaries. Yeah. And the intermediaries, their entire business model is predicated on not being liable for negligently hiring the wrong motor carrier. That's the crux of this case.
And am I right that C.H. Robinson wants this resolved? They're not being sued here. They're taking it to the Supreme Court.
Yes, so C.H. Robinson won at the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. And they also asked the Supreme Court to take this case. Now, this is so cool. I'm going to tell you a couple little weird little twists and turns in this case. 29 states in the District of Columbia, Republican and liberal states, have said they want brokers on the hook. 29 states in the District of Columbia. On the other side, you have the TIA, the Transportation Intermediaries Association. You have the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and a whole bunch of other associations saying brokers should not be liable. Now, I will say this. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, very great, interesting organization, has about an 80% success rate before the current Supreme Court. My gut tells me that the Montgomery case will go in favor of C.H. Robinson. That is a huge victory for them, but we will find out. This is happening right now. You can listen to the things live. You can tune in to SCOTUS and listen to the judges or justices ask questions.
But I would also argue either way, C.H. Robinson and large brokers are the win.
Absolutely.
Because if they are held liable, there's going to be a lot of brokers that go out of business, and a lot of small carriers who depend on that brokerage access will probably struggle as well. So it's a tightening event.
It will be.
And I can't speak for C.H. Robinson. I'm no longer a stock analyst. It's been about 10 years. But it's interesting to think about, because when these large carriers like a Landstar or a J.B. Hunt, they have their earnings call and they announce, we had a $15 million insurance hit or whatever it is. The stocks rarely get hit anymore. And I don't think C.H. Robinson would either. If the barriers to entry are a little bit tighter, that's probably a good thing. But I can also understand why many brokers don't want this case to be lost.
For brokers, they're not required to carry any auto liability insurance. There's no requirement under law to have that. They have to have a bond. Motor carriers have to carry insurance. And so we'll see this case unfold. It is, I'm telling you, the most interesting Supreme Court case outside the IEPA case that is before SCOTUS right now. We'll have an answer probably by the fall, maybe the winter. But if you listen to the oral arguments, you'll probably know which way they're going to go. You probably know.
Well, while we're on the Supreme Court, let's talk IEPA. Sorry, one more topic before nuclear verdicts. Yeah, go for
Just
it.
real quickly, this one is, I'm being serious now. How many of you have heard of the Learning Resources or VOS Selections case? How many of you?
The IEPA tariff case.
The IEPA tariff case. Okay. All right. I am so excited to teach you about this particular case. This is the most important case in my entire lifetime. I'm 41 years old. I promise you, I assure you, for everyone in this room, this case is the most important case in your lifetime. What this case is about is something called the Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. IEPA. It is fun to say, even more fun to explain. When this thing was put in place, it replaced something called the Trading with the Enemies Act. It's what you do to mitigate trading issues during an emergency. And you want the federal government to have emergency powers. If a meteor is coming, you don't need to go ask Congress to do something. You can go do it if it's an emergency. But what happened in this case, and many of the other panelists talked about this, kind of on the side of it, because in April of 2025, Donald Trump announced something called Liberation Day, and that was IEPA's reciprocal tariffs. It was a declaration of emergency, and just for the fun people who want to think about this, emergency declarations typically last for 10 years. They last for 10 years. They're not just like a day or 2 weeks or a month. It's very long. What Trump did was put tariffs on virtually every single thing across the globe, regardless of any other potential treaties or trade agreements that were there before. He fought this in court at the Court of International Trade. He lost. He appealed. For 1 day, there were no reciprocal tariffs. Then it was appealed to the Federal Appellate Court, and once again, he was found to have acted illegally. They were not enforceable, and they were stayed pending appeal to the Supreme Court of the United States. Last winter, it was argued before the Supreme Court. Here's the real question. One, what are the two powers that Congress has? They have the power to declare war and the power to raise revenue. Those are their two enumerated powers. They cannot give those powers away. So the first question is, does IEPA allow raising revenue? That is the first question. The second question is, okay, if it does say that, is it legal? Are they constitutionally allowed to do this? Here's what I want you to understand. This is why it matters. You may love these tariffs today. You may love them. Imagine your worst political enemy gets the power in a few years. There is nothing that can stop them from saying an emergency day one. They could say that climate change is an emergency, and every internal combustion engine and every component has a 5,000% tariff. What would any of you do? Absolutely nothing. The only way to overturn a declaration of emergency under IEPA is 2/3 of Congress, 2/3 of Congress overriding a veto-proof thing with the president. This is incredibly important. It is a balance of power, separation of power. We have a three-legged stool. That's the U.S. Constitution, legislative, judiciary, executive. This is a crazy interesting case. And the only agency or administration that I saw file an amicus was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, because every other organization from TIA, IANA, ATA were too afraid to file a brief. Because if you filed a brief in that case, you knew that your legislative priorities were gone. They were not going to let you come to the White House and say, here's what we want to try to achieve. The Chamber of Commerce had to do this. They had no choice, because this is all of their 300,000 members cared about reciprocal tariffs. And even if for the manufacturers in this room, I'm sorry I'm taking so long. Even for the manufacturers in this room, your customers were absorbing these costs. Costco has sued to refund their money, billions of dollars. I'm sorry, I'll stop.
No, it's fine. It's all good.
Passion? I like it.
But yeah,
I like it.
A lot of these people are struggling with these tariffs.
I like it.
Yeah, this case is so important for all of you. You got to learn about this case. It's incredibly important. Any day now we'll have an order. Any day, any day.
Next decision day is Friday.
I had a thought on non-domiciled. I want to make sure our audience understands.
Sure.
So that whole program is different than the H-2B visa that typically we associate with cross-border traffic in Mexico. What I saw in the recent ruling, I guess, or proposed regulation is they're going to just basically try to comply or work within the confines of the visa structure we already have set up instead of these other categories. The reason it's an issue is not because anybody's against immigration. It's because there's no way in the non-domiciled program and the EADs, what was that, employment authorization, to really verify the background of that individual driver. Whereas Bob in Illinois or Indiana, we can verify his or her background, but someone from Croatia, Armenia, South America, there's no way. We don't have that in our database. So that's why the non-domiciled has been such a source of passion. And I think it's been generally more of a negative because of the fact that self-certified CDL schools came about at the same time this exploded. We know for a fact there's a lot of folks that it should not be a truck driver. I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine, CPA in New Orleans and a lawyer, apparently has too much time on his hand. Last May, got his CDL. And I think Matt's heard me tell this story, but he calls me up. It was a 5-day CDL school. 2 days are completely rained out. He calls me up and said, I got this CDL. You wouldn't believe what it was like. You know, we did some driving on like Monday around cones and backing up. And one day they went out and did a little driving. And then Friday's there, and the instructor says, hey, time to go on the highway today. And he said, I've never prayed so hard in my life. And 45 minutes later, he got his CDL. And he calls me up and he's like, this system's broke. I wouldn't give myself a CDL if I had $1 million to pay myself. So that's how corrupt the system has become.
Yeah. All right. We've got a little under 10 minutes left. I'm going to open it up for questions in just a sec. I got one more as a nod to our friends from Great Dane here. Can you talk about the Wabash case and the reevaluation of damages going on in Missouri? I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah, this is all right. Like, raise hands again. How many of you heard about the Wabash case? How many of you lease trailers as part of your business? Okay, we got some people who understand trailers. Okay, this case is insane. It is insane. It's insane. It's crazy. Okay, here's what happened. Wabash made a trailer, I think, in 2004.
Yep.
And at the time, NHTSA's rule was that if you have this thing called a rear impact guard, people call it a Mansfield bar. I call it an ICC bumper. It's this bumper on the back of a trailer underneath the rear door frame. It's designed to do something called, it prevents an underride. Underride is a disinfected way of saying decapitation. If you hit the back of a trailer and there's no ICC bumper, you will be decapitated. That's what happens. Well, this case happens in Missouri, outside of St. Louis. Truck and trailer are stopped, owned by GDS Express. GDS Express parked the truck. Driver comes, we're going over 55 miles an hour. 2 facts I'm going to tell you that the jury didn't know, but you get to know them. First fact, the driver was drunk. That's interesting. The jury didn't hear that fact. Number 2, neither of them had any seatbelts on. Okay, interesting. That's another fact jury didn't hear. Under NHTSA, the current rule, I think it's, at the time of the manufacture, was 30 miles an hour. Today, I think it's 35 to prevent an underride. So the federal regulation on ICC bumpers is 35 miles an hour. If you hit it going faster, underride may happen, but the legal limit is 35. That's what NHTSA has. These folks hit the back of that trailer, both dead instantly. Both dead instantly. GDS Express, bankrupt immediately. They're done, they're toast. Who's left? Who's left? The plaintiffs look at Wabash, and they say, interesting. The federal regulation is 35, but you knew, didn't you? You knew that people hit the ICC faster than 35, didn't you? And Wabash said, well, we test, we understand this, but the rule is the rule. We follow the federal guideline. Goes to trial. The compensatory damages, the money I pay for your life, is $6 million per person, $6 million bucks. But there's punitive damages. $450 million. How'd they get that number? It's a little bit of fuzzy math. They say Wabash made $15 million of profit per year by not having what was not required, a more robust ICC bumper. They knew it for 30 years, 30 times 15 million, you get $450 million. Now, that was the largest verdict against a trailer manufacturer ever. Ever. Here's what happens. They have a review, they have tort reform in Missouri. In Missouri, the law is this. You cannot have the punitive damage be more than 5 times compensatory. So you have to bring that 450 down considerably. 12 million in compensatory, times that by 5, you get a better number. Wabash settles this case. Wabash absolutely could have appealed this case. And they may have won, like our friends at Warner did eventually. But for them, they made the decision that they are not going to litigate it further. And they settled the case, and I think the number was around 100 million. I believe they paid about 30 million. We'll learn this all as time goes on. They didn't do anything wrong. That's the key thing about insurance and transportation.
We're following the law.
You could do everything right, and I will bleed you dry. Because lawyers like me, not me, I'm not a plaintiff.
No.
Lawyers like me get 1/3 of that. How many companies on the planet can take a hit to the gut of $100 million? Not many. Not many. And when that happens, that cost gets spread to all of you. Not because the law requires it, but because someone anticipated it could have been done. Never admitted they were drunk, never admitted there weren't seatbelts. Doesn't matter. That is the world of liability. That's why it's so crazy.
Any questions from the audience? Dan.
So I have two kids, and it occurred to me that they may want to pursue a career in law now.
Yeah. It's a lottery ticket.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, what school, since it's so lucrative, where do I get something like this?
So being a lawyer is a really interesting profession, right? So, we will. They should. That's a great idea.
on thick.
I was going to say you could totally they could do it.
All kidding aside, could you maybe, anybody, take a minute and just kind of expand on the second and third order consequences of the brokerage industry? I don't mean to throw shade on anybody here that works for a broker, but it strikes me that, if I'm a large retailer and I have an in-house brokerage firm, it's a way of kind of cleansing a lot of my liabilities when those through.
Sure.
That's a great question. So,
Point number one.
yeah.
You read the plain letter of language, the plain letter of the text. You see provincialism of the carrier.
Correct.
Judges.
Yep.
It seems like a path of least resistance here. Very, very likely outcome. That being said, I would also argue that brokers have been, in no small part, largely played a meaningful role in the growth of non-CDL and maybe some of the issues.
I see
I'd
it
like
every
to-
day. We see it every day. Yeah,
I'll-
you're good.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk
ahead.
about. I'll start off because this is what I love talking about.
You got it.
This all begins with deregulation in 1980, the Motor Carrier Act. In 1980, 90% of truck drivers were unionized, likely Teamsters. There were 18,000 motor carriers. That's what it was. The goal of deregulation was to allow a whole bunch of different people to enter the business. And what brokers were able to do was aggregate capacity and bring prices down. The average driver made 38 grand in 1980. Today they make about 47,000. Just what they were making in 1980, $130,000 a year. So what we've seen happen is the intermediaries rise because they can aggregate the capacity of all these small motor carriers, and because the motor carriers do not increase their insurance or their qualifications, you have the brokers who are not in a position to say that's a safe or unsafe motor carrier. They rely on the FMCSA. 90% of motor carriers have no safety rating with the FMCSA. So you have this mousetrap that only leads to where we are, which is brokers make a massive amount of growth and motor carriers continue to be kind of stagnant. And that is the path it will continue to go. And why the shippers don't have brokerages internally? Because motor carriers, shippers realized that broker liability might tag them. So the shipper said, I have a motor carrier and then I have myself. I'll have myself, a broker, and a motor carrier. Give me levels of insulation. Do not sue me. And that's what we see happening. The Hope Trans case is amazing. We'll talk after because we're getting close on time.
That only works if your accounting is tight. Commingling of funds. Forget about it. You can put in all these layers: broker, leasing, carrier, common ownership, even holding company. As fancy as you want to get. But
Some shippers do have brokerage, but yeah, totally legal stuff.
Your accounting better be rock solid.
Yeah, and one of the shippers at a Reliance conference we had last year called me up a couple months ago, and they had lost. They were tagged as the shipper, and they ended up paying $25 million. And I would say more shippers are like them than not. They're not. I mean, their spend is less than $200 million a year on transportation. They don't have the resources to have a private in-house fleet or a broker. Obviously, there's a few behemoths that do, but I think that's going to generally remain a little bit more of the exception than the rule. Not so much on private fleets, but on brokers.
Yeah, we're coming up on time. Any final thoughts?
Learn about IEPA. Really cool. And CORCA.
Corca.
They're both really fun to
CORCA.
say.
Oh, Jeff?
Robinson,
Yeah.
what if? How do you think that changes the cost structure of the industry? And are we talking about an extra $1 million? Or are we talking about an extra $30-40 million that brokers will have to pony up?
My feeling is brokers would likely take the same minimum liability insurance as a motor carrier, $750, and just go bankrupt when they can't pay a debt.
Yeah.
That's what motor carriers do today. They just go bankrupt.
I mean, I remember CSA 2010, that was that whole, hey, we're going to raise the bond from 510 to 75?
From 10,000 to
10,000
75,000.
to 75. I didn't even make a dent. And part of that idea was to maybe kind of clean out some of the riffraff. Didn't make a dent. And I agree. I think it's going to take something that's going to have to raise it up to the point where it's going to be brokers that can financially afford to do it, that are savvy enough, that are running a good company. Yes. And yeah, it'll affect us all, by the way.
Well, and part of why we have a good market share with a lot of freight brokers is as they get to a certain size, our agents will advise them to carry $1 million of auto liability. Contingent cargo is another area, we call that fake news, but that's sort of something else. But this is where, whether it's insurance or the betterment of public safety, there's a lot of little bitty things that can be done, like the broker bonding. Maybe that should be tied to gross revenues. There's a tiering. I've actually talked to some plaintiff attorneys on auto liability. Maybe we keep it $1 million for 20 trucks or less, and then you start to build tranches plus a timeline. Like Tony said, you can't just do it like June 30th of this year. It's going to have to be built in over a 3 to 5 year period so the underwriters have enough capacity. And then maybe there's some sort of a inflation COLA, maybe not annually, but every 3 or so years, what's been the CPI during that period. And then you're going to have to do that because Congress isn't going to want to revisit that again for another 40 to 50 years. So if you want inflation protection in the future, it'd have to be built into some reform. And my CEO and I are going to sort of a secret symposium in April somewhere to share our perspective with some larger players. So we'll see how that message goes.
I look forward to the invitation.
Yeah. Secret was the key word.
Call me.
Interesting.
Okay.
We have more questions, but we're supposed to get out of here. But we can.
Let's
take
take,
it, right?
well,
They don't want to eat dinner. They
cus-
want to talk about the law.
customer's always right.
Sorry. Just one more last question real fast. Do you guys have any insights into the anti-dumping lawsuit that's going on with the trailer manufacturers right now?
I didn't get to that.
Ooh.
I don't.
I do not.
I don't have much on that. I have not been following that very closely. I think, I'm sure.
I think Jennifer will cover it tomorrow.
Find Chris and talk to him. He'll tell you all about it.
I think
Chris
Jennifer's
would be a
going to
great
cover it on the
person.
trailer panel
That
tomorrow.
looks like a laugh of
Okay.
both sadness and,
That looked painful.
yeah, it did.
I know our trailer analyst,
Sorry.
Jennifer McNeely, is on this, and she will talk about that tomorrow.
I do love trailers.
Tim, let me give another practical idea that, the FMCSA needs to hear. So we all know about the stealing of DOT and MC numbers. When there's a truck inspection, why not have an automatic notification go to the motor carrier and say, this VIN number is undergoing an inspection, and the motor carrier could simply say, yes, we confirm that is us, or no, we're going to flag that as fraud. There's so many little practical things that don't require a new regulation. They just require a little bit more thoughtful responses on the front lines to the folks, because so much of the time, a legitimate DOT number, someone with a truck has just borrowed it for the day or this week. What happens in insurance is these crooks, they'll stand outside a large distribution center with cameras, and they'll take pictures of all the trailer numbers, and then they'll use them, they'll concoct a plan to go in there and steal the trailers. I mean, there's so many layers to this, it's just astonishing.
Yeah, the amount of inside
we'll stop.
jobs.
I could keep talking about this all day.
Yeah. Well, we are holding you from dinner. We're going to have some
Yep.
final thoughts here in just a minute. But thank you, everyone, for an excellent panel.
We did it.
Thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
That was good.
Well done.